Hello there, it is I, Cassandra, the Vintage Arcade Gal, and we are down here in the arcade on my day off, and I wanted to show everyone the new addition to the arcade, which is a Tron, but it's a little different than most Trons that you may see, but we'll get to that in a second. If you're watching something about classic arcade games, you're probably pretty familiar with Tron, but like the three of you that aren't, Tron was a movie that came out in 1982 by Disney, and Bally-Midway also developed an arcade game around the movie that was released pretty much exactly at the same time. The movie was a hit, but it wasn't, I think they were kind of hoping for like Star Wars money, and that didn't happen, but it did well. It was one of my favorite movies growing up as a kid. It's a pretty good sci-fi tale, and it has obviously some innovation with the graphics, or the special effects, I should say. Early CGI, although most of the movie wasn't actually CGI. It was rotoscoped animation and some camera tricks and whatnot. But the game did really well. In fact, Bally-Midway came out with a second game called Tron, which is highly collectible for arcade game collectors and can be pretty expensive to find because it has some pretty unique attributes to the cabinet and the game itself. Mattel would go and release the home versions of the game, although strangely they didn't make a version of the arcade game for any of the home systems they supported, which may have been just because they were developed separately, or maybe the hardware just couldn't handle it. But I think that just they were developed separately and it just didn't happen. But anyway, we're going to look at Tron here, and our Tron is a little different. So let's take a look. So I'm going to try to keep my fat head out of this as much as possible. The first thing you're going to notice is it does have a real arcade joystick, Tron joystick, and spinner. These are authentic. And the control panel is, I think this is a reproduction overlay from a cabaret. It doesn't quite line up correctly. The spinner should be dead in the center of this graphic, and the player 1, player 2 are a little off center, but that's not a huge deal, I guess. And we have a credit button here. The one thing that does kind of drive me crazy is the marquee, which they did a really good job of backlighting it, so that's pretty neat on a small cabinet like this. And the bezel, they're stretched out almost like that woman in that movie Brazil who was in Who's the Boss. So it's like the ratio is not correct on the graphic. I want to get these redone so they look a little better. And I wouldn't mind trying to recreate some of the backlit kind of blacklight techniques, maybe down here, or I don't know. I don't even know if that's possible. Side heart is also pretty much what it should be for the upright, just a lot smaller, and it hasn't been stretched out, thank goodness. And the overall construction of the cabinet is great. Now, this monitor is not a CRT. It's a more modern, monitor, unfortunately, like a flat screen. It's a 19-inch, which is good size. But you can see behind me, I've got my little Thomas Automatics countertop, which is pretty standard for the size of a countertop with a CRT in it, but it's only a 13-inch monitor. And this thing is just huge. This is a big boy compared to most countertops, keeping with the 19-inch form factor. You could probably have kept it the size and had a 13-inch CRT in here. I don't know. Maybe that might be hard. It may still not be quite big enough for that, believe it or not. Okay, now the coolest thing about this guy, other than it just plays Tron, is what's inside. So we're gonna take it down and I'll show you the inside of it real quick. Here is the back of the game, and this is where really the magic lies, where I think this is just so neat compared to other games. Not that I have anything against like Raspberry Pi or multi-games. Some people get real twitchy about that kind of stuff, but this is really, from a preservation angle, much more interesting because, as you can see, it's running the original hardware from an arcade game. It's also very, very clever, and I have no idea who made this. The person I bought it from did not make it, but it's a pretty recent build. But it has a swing-out little hinge here that has the PCB, and you can see the wiring down here, and it's switching power supply, and it's essentially just a miniature Tron. And I don't think you can see way down in the corner, but there's actually the test switch and a coin counter button, and so yeah, you could probably put a small CRT in here, but you had to reconfigure some things. The game would have to be even larger, I think. But it's just Really well done compared to most of these things, I think, and having the authentic hardware on it makes it something really, really special. And again, I mean, there's some things I definitely would change about it, but not that space is a premium right now in the arcade, but it's definitely, you know, I could probably get a couple more full-size games in here if I really wanted to before it got too out of control. So having a smaller form factor like this on a game that I do enjoy and like to play is really, really great. If you've never played Tron before, it's basically 4 mini games, and you progress and they become harder and harder. So we'll just play together. You have your 8-way joystick. There's a trigger on the back and this kind of translucent blue plastic, which is super cool. And then you have a spinner similar to games like Tempest. And we're just going to put a credit on it. And it reuses the great music from Wendy Carlos, who did the music for the original movie. And we'll just go through the first levels. You have this is supposed to be the grid in the game, so you just choose a quadrant. It's pretty random. These are grid bugs. There you go. I think that's supposed to simulate the I.O. tower from the movie. Now we're going to go on MCP Con. This first series of levels is pretty easy. Light cycles, probably the most famous element of the movie. Ah, we got him. Of course, this obviously gets much harder. And then you have the tanks, which are also pretty predominant in the film. Oh boy. And then it just gets harder and harder as you go through. Now we have 3 tanks. Let's see, we'll do one more here. Now the grid bugs, there's more of them now. You can actually really point mine on this level if you so desire. The music is just so great. Alright, so there you go, there's the game. Alright, so there you are. There is a small Tron, a very tiny Tron that is somewhat authentic. Not 100% by any means, but kind of a cool addition to the arcade, something different, a different form factor. And like I said, I could probably get a couple more in here, but we'll see what becomes of that. I'll have to be very, very choosy, or I'll have to make some tough choices and get rid of a couple of them. So I do have a video I'm working on right now on the history of Axelon, which was one of Bushnell's companies post-Atari. It's super interesting that most people haven't really gone into as much depth as they should, because it's pretty fascinating. I have no idea when I'm going to finish it, though, because, you know, work and whatnot, but eventually it's going to happen. So if you're craving more of those, I get a lot of requests for like the deep dive history stuff, like I did with Centurion Liberator. Just those things are a lot of work, and I had to do a lot of research for them. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this one, and if not, it was free, right? So, you know, don't complain too bad. Anyway, see you later. Bye.